It is so good to be back here with all of you after an unusually long absence, which was partly due to Kyle's illness. In case you haven't heard it, he's well. The tumor was not malignant. The wound has healed, and he's walking very well on the leg. We also wish to thank everyone who has sent cards and notes or called. We were deeply touched by all the words. The whole thing of living for some 3 or 4 weeks on the floor with patients with a particularly serious form of cancer, most of them, was something so new. To really live with these people. There were 3 or 4 in the room together, and walking through the halls every half hour or so, looking into the rooms and seeing people, greeting people. Some people would look away, look the other way, just to be there. Either talk or not talk, but just to be there. It's utterly amazing what human beings live with and die with, cope with or don't cope with. So for this talk tonight, there came to me the saying of an old Chinese master, which goes something like this: sickness and medicine cure each other. The whole universe is medicine. Where do you find yourself? I'll say it again. It goes like this: sickness and medicine cure each other. The whole universe is medicine. Where do you find yourself? Living on this floor with people with all these different forms of cancer and all the different forms of therapy, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and hearing their stories, usually from relatives with whom one ate in the cafeteria. It didn't quite seem that medicine cured the sickness. In the better cases, it prolonged a life, very often a life of suffering, of pain, and at the same time producing new symptoms, new physical symptoms, and of course psychological symptoms. Many of the patients being asleep large part of the day, very often not so much during the night, because hospitals seem to be particularly noisy during the night, so people report. But there was very often a life of drowsiness. If patients had particularly severe pains, there was just a continuation of bags, little plastic bags that were hooked up to a needle in the vein, so that there would be no pause during which pain would be felt. If there was a pause, if a bag had emptied and the next one wasn't there, very often a patient would complain for the delay in getting the pain medicine, the pain fluid, the painkiller fluid. It seemed that the sleepiness and drowsiness helped to allay the fears which were in the eyes of many of the people there when they were awake. Fear, or sometimes, without using that word judgmentally or critically, a dullness, a dulling against painful thoughts. Some patients would come in regularly for their chemotherapy and then leave the hospital again, and some of them seemed very well. Some of them seemed to come in as though they were coming home. One older man had no one in his real home. When he came to the hospital, the nurses knew him and he knew the routines, and he seemed to feel quite at ease to be and happy to be taken care of. The blood pressure being taken, the pulse being felt, people there to relate to. One woman who had had surgery and had been dismissed, released. I met her again in the cafeteria when she had come for a checkup. And she said, "I miss this place. Here I was waited on. At home I have to do everything myself." An older woman, frail. Sickness and medicine cure each other. What sickness is he talking about? There may be medicines and remedies that cure sickness, or maybe just cure the symptoms. Most of the time, what our medicines and remedies get at are symptoms. It's much, much harder to discover an underlying cause of symptoms and to treat that properly. Sometimes it's impossible to treat it properly. Cause may not be known. And asking the doctor, "Why does such a tumor grow in the leg?" he said, "We don't know." What sickness is he talking about? A sickness that is cured by medicine and that cures the medicine. In finding out that one has a tumor, one doesn't know whether it is benign or malignant. One is suddenly faced with all kinds of thoughts. And these thoughts are immediately and deeply linked up with emotions, fear, anxiety for what may happen in the future, invalidism, or death. People, so their relatives told me, who never were afraid in their life, who were so healthy, all of a sudden gripped by anxiety, or else denying that anxiety totally, not even wanting to talk or think about it. And one person was from morning till late at night doing crossword puzzles and smoking. There was a lot of smoking on that floor in the lounge, and no one seemed to have the heart to complain about it, because one saw the anxiety in the face of the people who were puffing one cigarette after another. Why is there fear when one is faced with the possible ending of oneself? And why has one never faced that before? Now all of a sudden the fear just floods the total organism. One thought, one new diagnosis by the doctor, and the thoughts are going, and the fears are swamping to such a degree for some people that there's just no energy but to just flow with it all, drown in it. Where do you find the self? One may say, I'm not afraid of dying. People say that to me. I'm sometimes, after a talk on death during a retreat, people will say, that's one thing that I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid to die. One woman who called me just this past week, whose husband had been in the same room where Kyle was, and he died. She called, just overwhelmed with grief and overwhelmed with the memories of her husband. There seemed to be a very unusually close relationship between the two, and unable and unwilling to let go of the memories, feeling that this was all that was left, and yet the pain of it all. She said at one point during the conversation, the telephone conversation, I'm not afraid of dying. I would like to die, just to leave all this misery, which is still fear of living with the pain of loss. Not willing or not ready to just die into this pain of loss. Does one realize that as long as there is this strong attachment to the idea of me, myself, my life, and all the memories that are associated with it, all the ideas for my future, my family, me and mine. That as long as this attachment is there, there is the fear of death. It can't be otherwise. The attachment to self and the fear of the death of that self go hand in hand. They are indivisible. But where do you find this self? Where do you find yourself? What is it? One may say, there's no question. Of course, there is a self. It's me right here. But there's much more to what's right here than what's actually there. There are thoughts about it, ideas, images, wants, desires for the future and attachments to the past, wanting to be somebody at all cost or to become someone. And then the fear of not being or not becoming, which is the fear of dying. Can one begin today, right now, to face this? So that there never need to be a moment when one is swamped and overwhelmed with fear, which has never been faced before. To observe this me and this self, its symptoms during our everyday life, the constant need to defend oneself in the face of what one feels as attack or slighting, being stepped upon, not being recognized or approved or appreciated. Look at it at the moment that this pain arises, or the need to defend. What is one defending? Or what is it that is hurting? What is it that is getting insulted or slighted? And not just say it's me, but look, what is this me at this moment? And to wonder whether if there's no image of me and my ways, my position, my rights, if there's no attachment to that, then where is their hurt? Where is their sickness? Where is their fear? One may ask, how do you observe this me in action? How do you observe it? It's impossible. Because at the moment that I'm angry, at the moment that I'm defensive, there's no awareness, there's just anger. It just pervades every fiber of the body. At the moment that there's fear, it's so pervasive, there's no attention. Is it impossible? Does one come to that conclusion and therefore give up before one has started? What is fear? What is anger as it arises? If this question is asked with a passion, because one needs to find out, then there will be a tension when fear arises, when anger arises. Not to attend because one wants to have a method to get rid of it, a method to live with it or to get through it somehow or other, so to be free of it, but to find out the root of it, to see if there can be freedom from it. One thought, this tumor could be malignant, can flood the whole organism with fear. And then the thought of what will happen, what will the future bring, will I live, will I die, what will happen to my family? All thoughts immediately connected with all the emotions of fear, anxiety, maybe anger, guilt. One thought can one discern a thought as it arises and its consequences, its immediate, instant consequences, can they be immediately discerned with this energy of attention? And in observing thought, does one see that thought is divisive? It is thought that divides life from death. It is thought that divides me from you, us from them. In the world of nature, where there's no thought, I mean the world of the trees and water, skies and earth and the animals, where there's no thought, there's no division between life and death. There isn't. The death of a flower is the emergence of the fruit, the opening up of the shell, and therefore the dying of the shell is the emergence of the seeds. The decaying of the seed is the emergence of the new sprout. There's no gap there. There's no division there, because there's no thought about it, no attachment to any one stage or state, but the wholeness of flow of life and energy. Life being indivisible from death, being the same thing, inseparable. But human beings, by clinging to the idea of me and mine, instantly create the fear of death, of me and mine. And therefore the division between my life and my death. And it all happens in thought. Do you see that? Can one see and appreciate, at least theoretically, that if there was no no thought of self lodged in the mind, there would be no fear for the death of that self. And if there was no thought of death lodged in the mind, there would be no division, no fear. So where do you find the self? Trace it, track it down from moment to moment. The attachment to it, the defense of it, the maintenance, the repair. The power struggle between the selves. Who dominates whom? Who wins out over whom? The games we play in the name and image of self, taking it for real and being so seriously invested in it. Just recently this fall we were traveling with another couple. And once or twice we got to talk about these matters. At one point, a woman asked, the woman with whom we were traveling asked, "Why is this self a problem to you? It seems to be a problem to you. To me it is not. I like the struggles, I like the competition, I like to win, and if I lose, I'll take that in my stride." There's such joy in, fun, that's the word she used, in winning and being right, and if I'm wrong, well, I'll take the deflation. And she said, just as a matter of information, just give me the plain information. I don't want to hear too much all talking about it and around it. Why is the self a problem to you? Because you cannot give somebody information on this. It's something to discover for oneself, what this self is, where one finds it, as one finds it. And to ask oneself if when the self is active, wanting, fearing, demanding, winning, losing, whether at that moment there is any room for love, any room for others, or whether the division is already absolute between me and you, my advantage and yours, my disadvantage and you're taking advantage of me. Incidentally, talking about the self, I'm not saying one shouldn't take proper care of oneself. I'm not saying anything what one should or shouldn't do. But to observe what one is doing from moment to moment, thinking, saying, behaving. And what it is that causes our grief, our sorrow, our problems, our conflicts, our endless divisions, inside and outside, between us and other people and within ourselves. To ask the question and then to observe. not with any preconceived ideas or models, not from past experience or from what one has learned from books, but to observe it freshly from moment to moment as it happens. With no preconceived ideas and no judgments. Because if one is judgmental of selfishness, one cannot observe selfishness in oneself. One will not look at it. One will observe it in others, but not in oneself. Sickness and medicine cure each other. What does it mean? What is our underlying sickness? Isn't it division, isolation, separation, and the lack of love within? We may think it's lack of love from the outside, but it's lack of love from within, love can only emerge when there is no division within or outside. What is the self? How do I observe it? How do I watch it? Is it the self watching the self, meaning judgment, wanting to condemn or wanting to justify? Or can there be an awareness, an attention, or observation which is totally without any idea, totally without any intention? Just like a mirror that has no intention to reflect anything, but if something appears, it is clearly there. If nothing appears, then there's nothing there. And yet, there's the mirror reflecting, ready to reflect, not holding on, not getting stained. Then what is the self? Find out. Find out whether it has any more reality to it than thought, memory, idea, wanting and fearing. And if that is clearly reflected and seen for what it is, then what is it? Is it possible to act, live, to listen, and see and speak and respond without the self, without the idea of me, without trying to protect or promote or win, without fearing to lose, without fearing to make a mistake? Is it possible to act out of the emptiness of self, just attending? One can't say yes or no. One has to experiment with it, to do it, to try it, to watch, and to see that the moment that the thought of self arises, there is division. And the instant the thought of self disappears, vanishes, there's no division between me and you, or life and death. With the attachment to the thought of self, there's fear. Fear of loss. Fear of death. See it. Watch it. Find out for yourself whether this is so. You may say, but if there's no self, then I'm afraid. What will there be? I'm afraid of there being nothing. I'd rather hold on to what I know. What is it that we know? Isn't it all division? Conflict, occasionally, some brief moments of happiness, which vanish so quickly because we want to hold on to it, keep it, preserve it. The saying went, sickness and medicine cure each other. The whole earth or the whole universe is medicine. What does it mean? The whole universe is medicine. It means that there's nothing that is not medicine. Could it mean that no matter what is seen, no matter what is attended to, no matter what comes into awareness, if the awareness is whole, impartial, undivided, then what is seen changes, whether it is anger or fear, hatred. Dissolves, like snow that falls on a sunny pavement, melts. Yet we're so afraid to look for fear of what we're going to see. Yet it doesn't matter what it is that is seen within ourselves or within others. What matters is that the seeing be whole, not with a motive, not with fear, not partial to to me and my ideal images of myself, but childlike and innocent. Oh. Then it is the seeing, the wholeness of seeing, the wholeness of listening, which is the medicine. Listen. Is there anyone listening? Or is there just that? We will end here for today.